I almost started the podcast without the microphone in front of me. That would have been awkward in the editing process, so let me fix this really quick. Hey, before you start the podcast episode, I just want to lay out a couple terms and conditions that you're going to have to follow in order to watch this show. The first one is go ahead and follow so you never miss another episode of the podcast ever again. The second one is share this episode with a friend who might find value in what I said or what a guest spoke about. And the third one is go ahead, if you haven't already, write a review for the podcast. It's one of the only ways that this podcast gets shown to other people and we get to grow the show organically. And without further ado, let's get you into the next episode of Not Another Podcast. I hope you enjoy. Good afternoon, beautiful people. My name is Che. This is the Not Another Podcast. This is Not Another Podcast. It's okay. You know, we're still learning how to intro because this is a brand new thing to me. I've only done a couple episodes by myself. Most of them have been with guests, so I'm figuring this whole thing out on my own, trying to figure out how to best do this. So we're still figuring out the intro, so forgive me for any flub ups and stuff. This episode, we're going to be talking a little bit about how to stay positive in the short term. So for me, something that I've always really hated is when people use buzz terms, buzzwords or whatever, like just stay positive, don't think about that right now. Those types of things that aren't really helpful to somebody. Like if somebody's grieving the loss of somebody, or if somebody's really having a crappy day, you don't just look at them and say, well, look at the bright side, there's all this stuff. You don't point out other things. For me, I've always hated it when people just say that. I've always tried to provide context. So it's not about just thinking of the positive or whatever. It's not about pointing out all these other things that they could be grateful for, because then they can just come back in their own head, say something along the lines of, not to you, but to themselves, well, I was miserable before, and yeah, there are all these things, but I didn't see them before, so clearly I'm not grateful enough. And then it goes on this constant spiral of never really feeling enough, and it really doesn't help. Obviously, there are other ways to get around this, like making somebody laugh, stuff like that. But it's all about trying to add context to the situation. So in a previous episode, we talked about the small, irreversible steps that you can take to slowly start taking action more and more. I don't know exactly what I referenced in that episode, but as far as small and actionable steps, I think I referenced somebody texting or texting somebody. I would literally type out a message, leave the phone on the table, pace around if I really didn't want to send that message, or I was nervous of what would happen if I sent that message. I would text it, put it on the table, pace around, and then eventually work up the nerve to, it's not sending a text, it's pressing a button. The button happens to be the send button, but it's not about that. It's about pressing the button. Once you press that button, then all of a sudden the text is irreversible. You can't take it back, unless of course you're working with Snap or Instagram where you can unsend things, but you shouldn't do that. You should never train yourself that it's okay to take something back once you've put it out there. You just simply work with the consequences. You don't try to do anything like that. So it's about taking these small, irreversible steps, and the same thing applies to your everyday and long-term, overall long-term well-being. So for me, as far as the happiness thing goes, I'll give you a direct example of this experience I had probably a year and a half ago now, where I was working a photography job, and it was just a crappy day. Everything just wasn't feeling right. I woke up in the morning, I was like, ugh, whatever. Got up, and I was going to this job for grad images. It was a grad images job where I was taking pictures at a graduation ceremony. And it was a drive-through ceremony during the height of the pandemic, where basically the graduates would come through, drive, open up the doors, come in, get a bunch of pictures taken, get their stuff, and then drive out. It was a drive-through graduation ceremony. It was super weird. But I was standing there, and for the first couple hours, I was just it just wasn't good. I was not in a good mindset. I was not feeling good. I was feeling angry. I don't really know why. It just was a crappy day, and you're allowed to have those. So for me, I started thinking, I'm like, what is one tiny thing? I started thinking to myself, actually, before I go there, I started thinking to myself, well, just think better. Think more positive. Well, why am I not thinking more positive? I can't think more positive. Grr! That was my whole mindset at that moment. And it all just every time I try to put something out there, look at everything around me, all these things I could be grateful for, everything that I could be doing, hey, just think more positive. Think of this, think of that. It was it all just came back to me in this negative manner. it really, really, really wasn't doing it. It's like one of those tethered balls. Like you have the paddle and it's just like where you're. I don't know what that's called. Paddle ball might be paddle ball. Side note: this episode should be sponsored by Celsius, but it's not. I drink an ungodly amount of Celsius and practically single-handedly support their entire company. Anyhow, moving on. It's like one of those paddle balls where you keep on hitting it, but it will not go away, and it'll just keep on smacking you again and again and again. I don't think anybody else has used that metaphor, so, let's try to keep that one patented. Anyway, it's like one of those. So instead, I sat and I thought, what else could I do right now? So literally, when the next graduate came up and to get their photo taken, I just smiled at them. It was something super small, super simple, and I was just like, and for those of you that are listening, I just smiled. I was like, okay, here we are. Let's go. Went to smiling, and I was working with them. I was getting them to pose a little bit. I said, look right here. Ready? 1, 2, and 3. And I cracked a joke. I hadn't done that really all day. I just cracked a joke. They laughed. I laughed. I was like, okay, things could be a little bit better. It wasn't an immediate fix, but I felt a little bit better than before. And that is a small, irreversible step that you can take to feeling better in the moment. Just like these small irreversible steps that get you closer to taking action and doing things, these small irreversible steps, you can't take back something that makes you feel good. You can't take back something that makes you feel crappy. All you can do is do the thing that makes you feel crappy or do the thing that makes you feel good. And if you do enough of those things and they stack on top of each other, because if you feel bad and do something that's going to make you feel crappy, it's going to stack and you're going to feel worse than you did before. The exact same thing applies for when you're feeling good. If you're feeling good and you do something that's going to make you feel good, it stacks and you get more enjoyment out of the moment or out of whatever you're doing. So if you sit there and think, all right, let me just smile. It's something super small. And then literally, I'm pretty sure there are like scientific studies out there that are like, if you smile, it automatically releases endorphins to your body. Or something like that. But if you just smile, you feel an ounce better, a teeny tiny little bit better. And then I cracked the joke and they laughed and I laughed. I tried to laugh with them. And that brought me a little bit of joy. That brought me a little bit more. And I was like, okay, this isn't bad. So then I literally just like started looking at the stuff around me and started like touching and feeling things like the decoration and stuff when we had downtime, when there weren't graduates like running around and coming all around us. I just started like messing around with the decorations and stuff around me and started like just thinking of like really funny things in my head and started watching funny videos on my phone. And that didn't last very long, but started doing all these other things that I talked about. And over time, it only took me about an hour. It took me about an hour. I mean, it is a long time, but it only took me about an hour or an hour and a half to really completely turn my attitude around. And the day got so much better from there. And then my drive home was so much better. My time at home after the job was spent in much more joy than I had the time before. And that is just one example of the way that you can start stacking up your good credits, your happy credits, like whatever you want to call it, to start feeling better in the moment. It's about these small, irreversible steps that will get you closer to feeling better. Now, obviously, there are things in the world that when they happen, they suck. You lose people, you have major financial fallout, you just these big, massive, irreversible things that happen in life that bring people down to no end. And it's extraordinarily hard to come back from those things. And when it comes to stuff like that, especially losing people, you have to be willing to go through all the stages of grief. You have to completely let yourself go. You have to completely let emotions happen as they happen, but also be taking those healthy steps forward. I have no business speaking on this subject. I haven't lost anybody super close to me yet, thank goodness. But those are situations where these things might not exactly work in the moment, as long as you're being healthy about it in other or productive about it in other avenues. But what I'm talking about is just your daily mindset that eventually leads you to be able to handle things better and be more happy for longer, more often in the long term. So these are like your daily small steps that you have to take whenever you're not feeling super great. I mean, it's small, little tiny in the moment things that all stack on top of each other. That's really all I wanted to talk about this episode. I know it wasn't that long, but I was thinking about it a lot lately about how, when I'm feeling really, really crappy and all I do is I'm just like, oh God, this is so bad. This sucks. It's so easy to do that. But then you have to sit back and be like, why am I feeling this way? all right, well, what's one thing that I know makes me feel better? And let me do that. And it doesn't always work. It doesn't always flip me around immediately. I'm not always like, all right, ready to go at it again, you know? However, it is one small, irreversible step towards a better mindset in the next 30 minutes, 5 minutes, hour, 6 hours, from the morning to the evening. As if you wake up in a crappy mood, you need to end your day in a good mood. No matter if it takes you from, very moment you wake up to the very moment you go to bed to get there, you cannot let an entire day go by being that upset or angry or just frustrated or whatever that you're feeling in that moment. So that's all I got for you. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode and all the other ones previously. I'm going to say this in the outro, but I would really, really appreciate it if you guys left a review for the podcast. It would help me out immensely. And on my social media, I'm going to start posting more about the podcast. And if you guys could engage with and share the post regarding the podcast with anybody that you know, I would greatly appreciate it because I'm really, really trying to get this off the ground. I know that, the guest episodes are like, okay, the guest episodes are whatever. They're going to be an opportunity for people to learn about the person, about what they do, about the industry, about starting in the industry. That's all fine and dandy. But these episodes where it's just you and me, I'm going to be talking a lot about business and personal development and my experiences in the world as I'm currently going through all of these things, starting a business from ground zero and building up from there through social media, through marketing, through organic reach, all these different things, personal growth from day one until I'm going to keep you updated on my journey. So that's kind of what I'm talking about here. But if you have any interest in that and think that other people would find value in it, I know a ton of people found value in the cold shower start to finish episode. I even had somebody text me, was like, I took my first cold shower today, and it was awesome. And I was like, awesome, how miserable was it? She's like, totally miserable, but it was a great time nonetheless. Or it was fantastic nonetheless. It made her feel really, really good. So I know a lot of people got a lot of value out of that. So if you want to go check that one out or just share this one, I would greatly appreciate it. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and this is Not Another Podcast. Hey, I hope you enjoyed that episode of Not Another Podcast. Just like I said in the beginning, I would greatly appreciate it if you would go write us a review, follow the podcast so you never miss another episode, and share this with one friend who might find value in what I or a guest said during the show. Rob Dial always says, make it your mission to make somebody else's day better. And that quote, ever since I started listening to his podcast, has really changed my thinking as far as how I go about my daily life. So, with that being said, I'm going to leave you the way that Rob Dial leaves you every single episode. Make it your mission to make somebody else's day better, and I hope that you guys have an amazing day.